Hi, it's me. I know that it must be a surprise to hear from me after so long, but I never have been good at goodbyes. I'm in the complex right now at the time of this recording, waiting for you to come back with more supplies. And I thought I'd finally explain just what happened. How you and I got here, and why I left. I owe you that much. Well, I suppose I'll start at the beginning. When I was a girl, I remember looking at the stars every night through my telescope at my parents' summer home. So many little lights. Too many to count. I wanted to go up there so bad. You see, they represented the future to me. I was always taught that the day we reached the stars was the day the future would arrive. It was all I could think about. It became my obsession, my passion. Every day I would go to the library and just learn. Learn about space shuttle, learn about the dangers of space, learn about theories from the Big Bang to the 3 laws of robotics and everything in between. When at home, I would watch every single sci-fi movie and TV show I could get my hands on. There was never enough time in the day to learn it all. Eventually, I graduated from high school as valedictorian. A prodigy, they called me. Genius, savant. But none of that held any meaning to me. All I cared about was getting to the stars. I entered a university and was, as usual, the top of my class. I got my doctorates in engineering. I was a woman now, but nothing had changed. I still researched and conducted experiments every day as I always had. Only now, I needed to provide for myself. And I couldn't do that without a job. Luckily, there was no shortage of opportunities for employment, and I found myself employed at my university. In a way, I had now found a new home amongst the many students and fellow researchers, each one with their own passions and dreams for the future. Together, we worked tirelessly day and night. However, everything changed when we went to war. I'm afraid I can't give you as much information as I'd like to in regards of what ignited the conflict. I was never in touch with the current events that surrounded me. All I could think of was the future. So when the government sent a representative to me and my colleagues and demanded that we focus our attention on weapons development and surveillance, I naturally declined. At this, he exploded. He said that I would comply, or I, and more importantly, my friends, would be charged with treason and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't do that to them, and yet, to yield meant giving up on everything I had ever worked for. It meant that I no longer would be able to reach for the stars, but to be confined to the dirt. In the end, I bent to them, as they knew I would. All of my skills and talents were now being used to destroy my fellow man instead of raising them to new heights. I fell into depression. What was the point of it all? All of those countless hours of researching and experimenting, all of that work, wiped away in a day. I began to hate myself, so much so that I actually considered doing the world a favor and ending it all. At least then my work would no longer be used to hurt people, and I would have done it had I not been saved. In my depression, I had decided to down an entire bottle of aspirin. But, as luck would have it, a colleague of mine by the name of Robert, my future husband, had come upon me while I was passed out on the floor of the main lab. He rushed me to the paramedics, and because of him, I had lived. It may sound strange, but I hated him for doing that. What right did he have to stop me? It was a decision that I had made of my own free will. When he heard this, he said something that I did not expect. For someone so smart, you really are stupid, aren't you? I was taken aback by that. I expected anger, yes, but not out of genuine concern. He told me that I had a gift, and it was due to that I had a duty to fulfill. Not to my country, but to the people. And so he helped me in my recovery, and eventually he forgave me. Later, he loved me. It was during the time of my rehabilitation that Robert and I came up with a plan to deceive our government. The war was escalating, and a final confrontation was imminent. There was no time to try and save everybody, but we could save our friends and their families. It wasn't easy. It took every favor I had amassed over the course of my career, but it worked. I sent messages to every member of my team's family that I could reach. While we were able to reach most of them, some were completely lost to us. The country was, by that point, a war zone. Several cities were under siege, and since it was much too much of a risk to send digital messages, we were forced to send couriers. Most came back with their cargo and smuggled them inside the facility via transport trucks. The rest didn't come back at all. While this was happening, Robert was preparing our escape while making sure the top brass was none the wiser. The plan was to turn what was originally a prototype shuttle that we were working on prior to the war and disguising it as a missile. During the demonstration, the missile would transport us towards a shelter that we'd been developing in secret. In truth, that's where their money was really being spent at. It was brilliant. Everything was in place. We managed to smuggle all of our staff and myself on board, but Robert had to stay behind. Someone had to present our demonstration. I was so afraid. What if we got caught? What if Robert got hurt, or worse, killed? What if the rocket simply exploded on the launch pad? So many variables. Too many variables. I watched from a window as Robert set up the diversion. I never realized how good of an actor he really was. Maybe instead of working on algorithms, he should have been a movie star. But I'm getting off topic. Robert managed to fire up the engines. With a 30-second delay before the launch, I saw him arguing with who I assume was a general. I saw Robert elbow him in the gut and run for the shuttle. Men with rifles started firing at him. I ran toward the entrance and let him in. I could hear the bullets flying by my ears and hitting the wall behind us. Somehow, I managed to get Robert inside and seal the door. We were safe. At least, that's what I thought. Robert had been shot. There was so much blood. I tried to help him, but he pushed me away and told me to help strap him in. The shuttle was about to launch, and the men outside were trying to force their way in. I did as he asked. Just as soon as he and I were strapped in, I felt myself being forced back into my seat. We were launching. I looked at the rearview cameras and saw the men outside instantly burn to ash. Then I looked out the window and saw the night sky, full of stars, just like I remembered. I watched as we rose higher and higher. We just kept going until we reached the lower stratosphere. From there, I could see the stars. So close, so bright, so beautiful. But then, from the corner of my eye, I saw a flash of light. At first, I assumed that it was the rising of the sun over the horizon, but then there was another flash, then another. Several blinding lights ignited all across the horizon. It was as if the world was suddenly set ablaze. I'm sure you can figure out what happened. I don't know who launched their missiles first, but sometimes I wonder, did the enemy launch because they thought our shuttle was an ICBM? I don't know, and I probably never will. We started to descend, and I watched as the stars disappeared behind the clouds. What I saw after was horrible. I saw cities broken and burned. I saw the gray ash falling over the shattered landscape that was once my world. As we began to descend, I felt our shuttle shake violently from the turbulence. The shockwaves from one of the blasts knocked us off course. We crashed just a few miles off of our intended location. We were too far from the blast itself for it to do any significant damage to the shuttle, and the shielding protected us from harmful radiation outside. I unhooked myself and went to check on Robert. The bleeding had stopped, and he said that he was okay. He tried to make it seem that he had no pain, but I could tell he did. We geared up for the walk. We had experimental suits designed for our astronauts. They were still in the prototype stage, but we were more than confident that they'd hold up to the environment outside. It's funny, really. Suits that I had helped develop for space travel were instead being used on Earth. After helping Robert into his suit, I opened the hatch and climbed out with the others. It was like being on another world. Blackened skies, falling ash, scorched earth, and broken, skeletal remains of a city in the distance. I looked back at the shuttle, on all of my work, my passion, my dreams, then turned away. We walked. For hours we walked, until the sky began to finally become a bit less dark. We couldn't see it because of the clouds, you see, but the sun must have been rising. We had finally made it into the city, what was left of it anyways. We passed the charred remains of what was once our proud civilization. I saw a whole skyscraper impaled on another, as if it was simply ripped from its very foundation and thrown like a spear. But what got me the most was when we passed these shadows burned into the wall of a building. They were of a man and a little girl holding hands trying to escape the blast. I looked away and forced the thought from my mind. I still think about them sometimes. Eventually we made it. The building where the shelter was gone. Not a single brick was left. Luckily, we were prepared for this. You see, the building wasn't the shelter was built underneath it. Below were miles upon miles of abandoned subway tunnels, perfect for housing dozens if not hundreds of people. The entrance leading to the shelter was still there. I opened the hatch and we made our way inside. We were safe. Finally safe. We sealed the hatch and each made our own way. It may sound strange, but I really needed a drink. I was never one for alcohol, but I figured that I had earned a shot or dozen. As for Robert, he turned out okay. It seems that the bullet simply grazed him. Nothing a few stitches couldn't, fix. I was told all of this much later, you understand. I had passed out and woke up feeling like my skull was being split open. I had made my way out of the sleeping quarters and I heard voices. Everybody was in the cafeteria. Some were talking, laughing, and a few were crying. One of our team's family members, no idea whose, came up to me and thanked me for saving their lives. I was surprised. The last thing I expected was gratitude. If anything, I expected resentment towards taking them from their lives. I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded. I looked around and noticed that Robert was nowhere to be seen. I began to worry. I asked where he was. One of the men, Jerry, I think his name was, said that he hadn't seen him in hours. I began to search for him, making my way through the facility. I felt like I had been walking for hours. Unlike Robert, I was not familiar with the layout of the shelter, so I was completely lost. Eventually, I headed back the way I came and went to lie down in the sleeping quarters. It was there that I found him. He was scribbling in some notebook and muttering to himself, almost as if nothing had changed. I could see his bandage underneath his shirt. I don't remember if I called out his name, gasped, or even did anything at all besides just stand there. But he suddenly turned around, and I could see how very tired he was. I asked if he was okay, but he just said that he had a plan to fix everything, and that he just needed a little more time. Time for what? I asked. He didn't say anything, instead choosing to go back to writing in his notebook. I didn't know what else to do, so I just left him there to do whatever it was that was so important. I didn't see much of Robert in the next few weeks, and when I did, he was always mulling over his notes and talking to himself. The only time I ever saw him like that before was when we were working on this shelter. This time, though, it was almost as if he was even more invested in his work. What he was working on, though, I didn't know. I gave him his space, partially because I knew he was busy and partially because he was starting to scare me. Things were starting to get bad around the complex. People were starting to crack. They were here because of Robert, and I, and it was us that they looked to for answers. So what are we going to do? Where's Robert? How long are we going to be down here? My son's got diabetes. Do we have enough insulin? On and on it went. I wanted to give them answers. I really did. But I had none. Robert planned everything. I just helped him whenever he asked. When they realized that I didn't know any more than they did, the room went silent. They stared at me. I stared at them. I didn't know what else to do, so I just left. Later, I heard several people arguing with each other. Some spent their whole day crying. I pretended that I couldn't hear. Then one day, he woke me up in the middle of the night, this look of pure excitement on his face. "I've done it, Francine." "Done what?" I asked, perplexed. "I found a way to save us, save everybody," he exclaimed with such energy that I had to tell him to keep it down or he'd wake the others. I could see the deep dark bags under his eyes. "When was the last time you slept?" I asked, feeling more than a little concerned. 2, 3 days, not sure really, but that doesn't matter. I've done it. I started to ask him just what in God's name he was talking about when he interrupted me. "You'll see." He kissed me on the forehead and left me there, staring after him as he receded into the shadows. That was the last time I saw him alive. It was the scream that woke me. I jumped out of bed and ran from the room, looking for the source of the scream. I was so afraid. Had it finally happened? Were they finally starting to kill each other? Then, down the hall, I saw them. Everyone was gathered in front of Robert's office. My stomach tightened. I felt sick. As I approached, the crowd silently cleared the way. I made my way through the crowd. Then I saw him. Robert was sitting in his chair behind his desk, this little frown on his face. In his dangled hand was a half-empty bottle of pills. He stood there staring, not feeling. It just didn't seem real. Robert would not do that. Robert couldn't do that. Not after everything that we went through. I hit him. I screamed at him. How could he? How dare he? He saved my life when I tried to do the same thing. And now after all that, after all we went through, he just left me here? Alone? Bastard. His body was cremated. I wasn't there to see it. I couldn't. I stayed in my quarters for the next few days. I spent most of my time sleeping, dreaming of starless skies. It was a week later when it started happening. There were shots. This time it was a family. The father was one of the grad students that had been with me and Robert from the very beginning. Looking at the scene, it was obvious that he had killed his children first, then his wife, then himself. The most disturbing part was that there was no sign of a struggle. That hit me hard. They had just given up. Unable to face the next day, they just checked out. That night, another family was gone. The day after that, a man and his wife. A month later, there was less than half. A week after that, there was no one. No one but me. I took it upon myself to cremate them. I wasn't even shocked. When you see something enough times, it loses its ability to shock and frighten you. I took them, one at a time, to the furnace, and when there was nobody left, I went back to my quarters. How long I stayed there, I couldn't tell you. It's easy to lose track of time when you're underground. Eventually, I got up and left the room. What the point of it was, I didn't know, but I had to get out of there. I walked. I walked and walked until I found myself in another part of the complex I hadn't seen before. That's when I met you. I was so confused when I saw it. All of that equipment and I don't even know what. I always knew that Robert was a genius in his field, but not on that level. I look back and I still feel like it was some sort of a dream. But it wasn't, was it? You were real. You scared the hell out of me, you know. I mean, how often do you meet a real AI? But I'm really glad I met you. If I hadn't found you that day, I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have joined the others and just... You saved me. You really did. I never would have made it if it wasn't for you. Not just because of all the work you helped me with in keeping this place running, and not because of all the food you brought in from the outside, but because you didn't leave me alone. And I never wanted to leave you alone. I promised myself that I'd never do that to you. But I have to break my promise. I'm dying. I'm so sorry. I know it's not fair, and I know it's not right, but it is the truth. I'm going to leave this message in your databanks on your next maintenance check. It should play in exactly 1 year. By then I'll be gone. But if you ever feel alone, I want you to look up at the stars. Because somewhere out there, among those countless lights, will be me, smiling down at you. I've got to go now. I'll miss you. I'll remember you. Will you remember me? I'm standing in front of a burnt tree on a hill overlooking the complex I once called home. I look down at the unmarked grave I dug 1 year ago. I look up at the starlit sky, and I remember. I will always remember. Well, ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that just a fantastic subscriber-submitted creepypasta? If you enjoyed it, please make sure to check the link below for all of Dark Scholar's work on Reddit. Leave a like, a comment, and be sure to click that subscribe button and little bell so you can be notified when my videos pop up. And, as always, my Darkness Militia, have a terrifying evening.